Welcome to another episode of Money Majlis, the podcast where we explore the future of finance, technology, and the world with some of the most visionary minds on the planet. I'm your host, Suvo Sarkar, broadcasting from Dubai, a city where tomorrow is being built today. I'm privileged to welcome a guest whose ideas are rewriting what's possible for humanity. Pablos Holman is a renowned hacker, inventor, and a futurist who's turning science fiction into reality. He made an electrifying presentation at the Dubai Futurist Summit 2025, and today we'll discuss how emerging technologies can solve humanity's biggest challenges, from eradicating diseases to powering a sustainable world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, investor, or just curious about tomorrow, this episode should spark your imagination. Let's get started right after this message from my sponsors.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aquanow, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
Money Majlis is brought to you by E&, a global technology group.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Intellect Design Arena, driving digital adoption in banking and insurance.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Live Digital Bank, powered by Emirates NBD. Trust and innovation combined.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Today's guest on Money Majlis is Pablos Holman, a futurist, inventor, hacker, venture capitalist, and now best-selling author of Deep Future, Creating Technology That Matters. Pablos isn't your typical technologist. His wild career traces from hacking and early cryptocurrency work in the 1990s to building spaceships at Blue Origin for Jeff Bezos, to leading hundreds of breakthrough inventions at the legendary Intellectual Ventures Lab. Pablos and his teams have tackled some of the thorniest problems in society, from creating nuclear reactors powered by waste, to climate solutions like hurricane suppression, to inventing a laser, yes, a laser that can shoot malaria-killing mosquitoes out of the sky for Bill Gates. Currently, as a founder of Deep Future, Pablos helps back mad scientists and audacious entrepreneurs building real deep tech, tools and inventions that aim not for marginal digital improvements, but for game-changing leaps in energy, food, recycling, health, and infrastructure. His work challenges Silicon Valley's obsession with novelty apps, advocating for truly world-changing technology. With over 70 patents, viral TED Talks with millions of views, and a reputation for both edgy honesty and profound vision, Pablos is often the first phone call for leaders staring down big, impossible questions. With Dubai emerging as a global innovation hotspot, today's conversation couldn't be more timely. Pablos, welcome to Money Majlis. First of all, what do you think of the Dubai Futurist Summit?
Oh, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. Well, I love Dubai. Coming here is one of my favorite things to do. And the Futurist Summit, which is a totally new thing. I've never even done something like that before. They rounded up a whole bunch of folks who are really focused on trying to interpret what's possible in the future and adapt that for people so that they can be thinking about what it means for them and their businesses and what they're doing. So it was a really interesting group of speakers.
Pablos, I believe yesterday, one of the engagements you had, one of the many engagements, was meeting the Prime Minister's office in Dubai. Yeah. Tell us what that meeting was all about.
It was amazing. Some of the folks we met there have this department called the Department of Zero Bureaucracy, which I thought was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I don't know any government in the world that has a zero bureaucracy goal, much less a department. And these folks have been at it for years. They're the ones who, in part, are responsible for digitizing all the government services in this country, but they're going way beyond that, trying to streamline them, get rid of all the useless stuff that people have to do, And it's just such a wonderful and inspiring thing. I wish every government had something like that.
Don't be. Pablos, going back a little bit, you've had such a diverse career, from early cryptocurrency work in the 1990s to spaceship building at Blue Origin more recently. What sparked your passion for invention, and how did those early experiences shape your approach to technology today?
Well, I think the thing that affected me the most is that I got one of the first computers you could have at home when I was a kid. And I grew up in Alaska, which is pretty remote. So there wasn't really anyone around who'd ever seen a computer before or knew more about it that I could learn from. So I just had to learn how to use it kind of the hard way, just figuring it out myself. And I was so excited about it, and I wanted everybody else to see what I saw. I felt like I had this superpower, this computer that could help people do all kinds of things. And so a lot of my childhood was trying to convince people that computers were cool. They were not convinced. They'd never seen a computer, but they knew they weren't cool. And so it took a while, but revenge of the nerds, I was right. And eventually computers did get useful, and they went everywhere. And so that was really the early start for me. And then starting with Blue Origin, I started trying to use computers to advance other kinds of technologies. And ever since then, that's what I've been doing, working on trying to bring new technologies to life that can help solve big problems and be really useful for people.
But Alaska, Pablo, such a beautiful state to come from. I was there last year on a holiday. Just loved it. Loved
Amazing.
That place.
It's beautiful. That's true.
Pablo,
I had enough for a couple lifetimes, so I'm good. But I'm glad you got to go.
Do you still go back to Alaska sometimes?
Just occasionally.
You do. In your book, Deep Future, you say Silicon Valley's biggest win has been disrupting yellow cab, but not General Motors or General Electric. Now, with global GDP topping $100 trillion, and the entire tech sector accounting for only 2% of that, only 2%, why do you think some of the brightest minds remain fixated on shallow digital problems rather than, let's say, the deeper tech opportunities in foundational industries like energy, food, or construction?
Well, I think we started out having to go through this process of applying computers to everything, applying software to everything. There were huge gains to be made there in almost every industry in some way, but especially what you might call knowledge worker industries, the industries that are about information.
Yep.
And so it took us 20 years to do that, essentially, is how you could think of it. We had to put computers on every desk, then we had to put them in every pocket. We had to connect them all up to the internet. We had to write all the software to make them keep track of your banking transactions and your, Tinder dates and all those things. And so now that that's been done, I think, we can sort of reflect on it and see that, all right, computers were generally useful, so they had to be applied everywhere. That was fast and cheap in a lot of ways, and it was an easy way to make a lot of money. And so it attracted so many people to work on software projects. And that's all really great. I love software, but now we're at this point where we sort of built all the software for PCs, then we rebuilt it for the internet, then we rebuilt it for mobile phones, and now we're going to rebuild it with AI. But it's still just solving the same class of problems. And it's very limiting in the sense that it's causing the tech industry, it's causing Silicon Valley to ignore the much bigger problems in the world. And those are the ones that you named, and there are many more. And those are big industries that have been around for centuries. We take them for granted, but you're not going to radically improve them with software. You're not going to radically improve how we feed people with software or how we do mining or construction or manufacturing. So now is the exciting moment when that all kind of changes. Now our computers are so good that we can use them to help us reinvent how we do all those other things. And that's what deep tech is about.
So for our listeners, Pablos, would you just define deep tech a bit more?
Sure.
Is it hardware versus software? Is it bigger problems versus smaller problems? What is deep tech?
So you could think of it as hardware versus software, because a lot of the time, the first filter for the tech industry, if they're looking at doing something, is, do I have to do anything with hardware? because it's hard. That's why it's called hardware. And so they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so most of the tech industry and investors in the tech industry have been avoiding anything that involves hardware. But that means that because they've been avoiding those things for 20 years, there's such massive opportunities there that have been ignored. And so I think of deep tech in a couple ways. One, it's about finding breakthroughs that can make something that humans rely on maybe 10 times better, 100 times better. Real multipliers. We want force multipliers.
Yep.
If something makes an industry 2% better, I'm not going to work on that. And then by better, what I mean is we want to go after big problems. You want to go after the problems that every human on Earth relies on. And yeah, there's some people who rely on Snapchat, but by and large, you could live without it.
Yep.
Nobody can live without food, clothing, shelter, that's construction.
Yep.
Clean water, energy is fundamental. So these are the kinds of opportunities that deep tech really can go after.
The less sexy area, let's say, is that right?
I think it's more sexy, but opinions vary about what's sexy in the world.
But tell me, Pablos, do you then believe that Silicon Valley has taken the easier route out by focusing on the Airbnbs and Instagrams and Ubers of the world, which have crazy valuations today and have made a lot of money for the investors and the inventors?
Of course. I mean, it is not necessarily a bad idea to do the easy stuff first, but I think most of the easy stuff has been done. And so now it has also gotten easier to do the hard stuff. And so, an example of that is, a good example of deep tech these days would be Blue Origin or SpaceX. They're trying to take on something only governments could do in the past. And now and then, you'll see on Instagram, SpaceX will explode a rocket, but they have to do that a lot less often than NASA did. And the reason is using software, they can model the rocket, they can test the rocket, they can crash the rocket thousands of times in software before they go build one. And so that is helping us to be much smarter about what to build. So we're doing the rapid iteration process in software. That's part of what really made software so powerful to begin with. Now we can do that rapid iteration in software for all the hardware and then go build one rocket or build one Tesla or build one hypersonic jet or things like that.
So, Pablos, at your Intellectual Ventures lab, you attacked tangible threats from malaria to climate change. In your mind, what's a major overlooked crisis you believe urgently needs radical rethinking, or one that is still unaddressed by the tech's current mindset?
Oh, well, almost everything I work on, I think, is unaddressed by tech's current mindset. We're lucky in that context, in that lab. It was an invention lab, and about half of our projects were things that Bill Gates brought us. And he had the benefit of having the Gates Foundation, which looks all over the world to try and find big problems. And when you're an inventor, you really want to take on a bigger problem. It's so hard to do things that you want to be making it worth your while. So what was great is the Gates Foundation in particular was looking all around the world. Anywhere kids are dying, they're very involved. And so Bill would bring us these kinds of problems, and we got to spend about half of our time working on these humanitarian problems. How do you eradicate infectious disease? Millions of kids a year are dying of these diseases that are spreading. Many of them we've been able to eradicate in more developed countries, like the U.S. has not got a malaria problem. We used to have a malaria problem, but we were able to wipe it out. In places like Southeast Asia and in sub-Saharan Africa, you have a huge malaria problem still. And the technology we used a century ago in the U.S. isn't going to work. And it's not going to work because those areas are just too big. We did it we got rid of malaria in the U.S. by spraying chemicals that kill everything. And then most of the good stuff kind of comes back to life without the malaria. Well, that was the best technology we had at that time, but it's not good enough to solve the problem at the scale we have it. So we have to invent new technologies for that, and that's what we're trying to do.
Tell us a bit more about your collaboration with Bill Gates on the famous mosquito zapping laser to fight malaria. I mean, what were the technical and social hurdles in bringing something so far-fetched into life?
You know, we would do these invention sessions where we would get somebody with a problem. Sometimes it would be Bill bringing a problem like malaria. And then we'd surround them with a nuclear physicist, a laser expert, a chemist, computer hacker. Collectively, we would know the cutting edge in every area of science and technology. And that's really what made it possible for us to invent at a large scale. So when we were early on working on malaria, in one of those sessions, somebody suggested that we could shoot down the mosquitoes with a laser. And we just sort of laughed about it because we thought it was funny, because you always try to invent a solution involving lasers because lasers are cool. Well, one of the folks in the session had worked on the Star Wars program for Reagan in the 80s. And that was an idea to shoot missiles out of the sky from space with lasers, which is also crazy. But they spent $50 billion proving it could work. And so he said the mosquito in this context, in 100 meters or so, is actually a bigger target to hit with a laser than the missile from space. And so we knew it would work. So then we started just trying to prototype it in the lab and got it working. And it's actually, so for a decade or whatever in the lab, we had that thing running, and we'd grow mosquitoes in the lab. And the machine would find them and aim a laser at them and follow them around. And that's actually really cool. The problem with that invention is that what we wanted to do is use it in, imagine it in Africa. You put one of these things on a fence post every 100 meters or so around a village or a clinic or something. And what happens is mosquitoes fly towards humans at dusk to go get blood. That's for reproduction for them. And so the idea is they cross that border. So kind of like a moat around a castle, you'd have this laser moat. Every time a mosquito crosses the border, we just shoot it down. That's the idea. The problem is a laser that can kill a mosquito that's powerful enough to do that in an eye-safe band of spectrum is still expensive. And so even though we invented this a long time ago and we've done it in the lab, it's not cheap enough as a solution that we could deploy it the way we want to in some of these places that suffer.
You think over time that might change?
Well, what's very interesting, we thought the price would come down. And because we're big devotees of Moore's Law, in our lives, we've seen the price of everything we work on come down because computers just got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every year.
Yeah.
Well, lasers don't. So that was the problem. Everything about it did get cheaper. And the machine vision is cheap and the cameras are cheap and all that. But the problem with it is the laser never got cheaper. So we still need somebody to invent a cheaper, eye-safe laser.
Like you said, Pablos, not every solution that looks disruptive delivers true impact. I mean, how do you distinguish between world-changing inventions from short-term, surface-level hacks, especially when investor hype can blur that line?
Yeah. Well, look, like I said, a lot of the easy stuff is being done by somebody else, doesn't need my help. So I don't work on those things. And you could imagine, if you're an engineer in a big company, like if you work at Hewlett-Packard, your job is to figure out how to make an inkjet printer, 1% better. And there's a lot of important invention being done in that context. I'm not going to do that. I'm trying to find the guy who figured out what comes after inkjet.
Yeah.
And so it is hard to guess right about winning technologies, and that is kind of my job because I invest in these things. But one way that I sort of cheat at that is I look at something and I say, okay, never mind how hard it is or expensive it is or complicated it is. 100 years from now, will we be using this new technology, or will we keep doing it the way we're doing it? So try that on, electric cars. 100 years from now, we're going to be burning, gas to get cars around, or are we going to make them electric? Most people could answer that question pretty easily. They have their own opinion. It's a much easier question to answer because in 100 years, anything could change.
Correct.
Batteries could get cheap, manufacturing could be automated, governments could get their act together, and all these kinds of things could change in 100 years. So if you do that, then you have a vision for the future that you believe in. And from there, you could try to back out, okay, does it have to take 100 years or could we do it in 10? That's what I'm looking for. Could we make those changes in 10 years? And that's kind of the rationale you could imagine for the early days of Tesla. Auto industry is all, powered by gas cars.
Yeah.
And Tesla had to ask themselves, is it going to take 100 years to change that, or could we do it in 10? And they believed they could do it in 10, and they essentially did. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Could we do it in 10 years? And the reason 10 years is important is all of our machinery of the world is kind of built for 10-year cycles. A career, you could devote 10 years of a career to something.
Yeah.
Investment funds like mine, they're all 10-year funds. I got money, I got to invest it, and then I got to return that in 10 years or less. And so if you can map projects to it or your goals to a 10-year cycle, you can get a lot done. And what's amazing people don't realize is lots of huge and impressive things have been done in 10 years or less. Google, Apple, Microsoft for sure, but also the Apollo program, the Hoover Dam, the Panama Canal, the Space Shuttle program. All of these things were done in 10 years or less. And so when you look around the world, it's kind of hard to find things that ambitious. And you have to ask yourself why that is. But, we try to find the cracks and get into them and wedge them open and bring new technologies to life.
Amazing. Pablos, you emphasize the importance of failed experiments in innovation, yet society generally rewards successes. In practice, how do you build environments where genuine experimentation, right, sometimes resulting in failure, remains encouraged? And in your mind, is there a memorable failure that led to a deeper invention?
The way I think about it, it's less about failures and more about shots on goal. So if you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, you could try to get a bunch of smart people, sit down, imagine all the problems, imagine all the ways it could go wrong. Usually you end up convincing yourself that it can't be done and you move on. Better than trying to be smart is to create a context where you can run a lot of experiments. And I think of Silicon Valley as thousands of million-dollar experiments. Every startup is an experiment. And we don't know what's going to win. If I'm an investor and a venture capital investor, we're considered the most crazy investors. We'll put money into a dozen startups and try to get one of them to pay for all the failures. That's the business model. Yeah. I'm kind of in the craziest end of Silicon Valley, you could say, because I invest in these wild technologies very early. So I'm kind of in the 100-to-1 game. I'll put money in 100 different inventions, but one of them has to pay for all the failures. And the failures, some of them are, it's not that they're bad ideas, but you can't guess what the competitive technologies coming might be. You can't guess what's going to get invented next year. You can't guess necessarily which founders are going to, implode and have a meltdown, or you can't guess what the market's going to be like in 5 or 10 years on a lot of things. So you have to get a lot of shots on goal, and that's what's great about that machinery of startups and venture capital that Silicon Valley has optimized largely for software projects, but these days, but it didn't start that way. It started in the hard stuff. And the Silicon Valley of the 80s was taking on really hard stuff, making chips and stuff. So now I think the thing for most people to look at in their business or their organization is how do we get away from trying to be smart and get ourselves into a place where we can test a lot of ideas. And if you test 100 ideas, 99 of them fail, one of them works, that's a success. And so that's how I think about it. And I think, people are missing out on an opportunity to internalize that wisdom. It's not coming from me. It's coming from the history of successes. And so if you look deep enough behind any success, you're going to find those 9 or 99 failures that made it possible. And so I try to get people to see it that way. in order to do anything new, you're going to have to do it that way. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Very well said. Just shifting gear, Pablos. In your TEDx Midwest talk, famous one, right?
Yeah.
You famously hacked a hotel TV and even accessed someone's voicemail live on stage. I wish I was there to see this. What do you see as the biggest vulnerabilities in everyday tech right now? And how should individuals who are normal like me protect ourselves?
Well, we have a maxim in computer security, which you may have heard, which is that if you're being chased by a bear, you don't actually have to be able to run faster than the bear. You only have to be able to run faster than your friends. And so that's a pretty good way of thinking about security for computers, because it is this war of escalation. You know, hackers, and especially criminal hackers, are always trying to come up with new ways of attacking things, and the companies who make products, make software, are trying to figure out how to defend against those things. And so it's this kind of cat and mouse game that continues to go on, and the way to lose the game is to try not to play. You can't win the game, but you can definitely lose, and so you really want to stay engaged. Now, that how engaged kind of varies depending on what you have to protect. Now, if you are a normal person with nothing weird about you, or you're not attracting a lot of extra attention, then the main thing to do is just follow all the advice you've heard before. Use a password manager. Don't use the same password everywhere. Use two-factor authentication. All these things, and try to be cognizant of what you're doing. You know, if you get a weird email, stall for a couple seconds before clicking on some weird attachment if you don't know who it's from or what it is, and those kinds of things.
Yep.
Right now, I'd say for most people, you rely so much on the software you use to protect you. So that starts with your phone and your computer. These days, most people are getting by pretty well if they're using like the Apple products are very secure out of the box.
Yep.
There are people trying to attack them, but those tend to be very sophisticated, it's a very expensive game that only nation states are playing. And so you're probably not the target, and they're not going to waste their valuable attacks on you anyway.
Correct.
So you're probably okay if you are somebody who has governments coming after you, or you're up to something that makes you a target, then you may have to take extra precautions.
Pablos, as deep tech requires long lead times, large investments, and regulatory navigation, what policies do you think the government should enact to foster more ambitious, more risk-embracing moonshots in sectors like energy, agriculture, or water, typically sectors that are underfunded by venture capitalists?
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about what governments should do or how they operate, so I'm probably the wrong guy to ask how they can be effective. I know more about how we can be effective at developing these tools. I think of them that way, technologies as tools for humans to do better things. We invented this machine that could suppress hurricanes, and it's real easy. It's real simple. It's not that expensive. It totally works, but there's no business model. And it's disappointing because you see that for something like that really would be a public good, you need governments to step in. You need them to do the things for which there is no business model. And that's what I think we need our governments to do a good job of. Right now, it seems like most of them are not able to focus on those things. They're not doing a good job of that. And all the things that could be done as a business, we have a really good system for that. Businesses are happy to take on anything that they can go get paid for and get customers for. So I don't know why you would want governments doing things that businesses can do. We need the governments to do the things that our businesses can't do. And so I think there's a huge amount of potential to the way I think about what I do is I'm trying to co-opt the machinery of venture capital, co-opt the machinery of startups because those have been so successful at bringing new things to life, new technologies to life.
Yeah.
I want to use that machinery to bring a different kind of technology to life. And I think a lot of people don't realize that's where the biggest opportunities are. And you sort of mentioned it, but there's a limit to how big of opportunities you can go after with just software. So if you add up the revenue of everyone in Silicon Valley making software, including Microsoft and Facebook and Google combined, it's about $2 trillion a year. So that's a lot of money, but the global GDP is excess of $100 trillion a year.
Correct. So
that other 98% is the things we've been talking about, the things that Silicon Valley can't touch. They got a little tiny glimpse of it with taxis. They got a little tiny glimpse, maybe a bigger glimpse of it with automotive at Tesla and rockets at SpaceX. Those are sort of the early examples.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of other industries. We're going after shipping. Shipping alone is a $2 trillion industry, completely untouched by technology. Durable goods, that's $4 trillion. That's all the physical things you buy, lamps and light fixtures and
the
bicycles
toasters and fridges and everything else.
Yeah, that stuff. Well, that's a $4 trillion industry Silicon Valley doesn't play in. You look at energy. That's the biggest market in the world, $15 trillion a year. And you could say there's some technology. They're using computers to control grid demand, switching and stuff. And there's technology in things like solar panels. But by and large, we have much better technologies we could be bringing to improve energy production and grow energy production. And that's not something you're going to get out of an iPhone app. So I think that what will happen here is, especially as investors start to recognize this, they see that they have not been investing where the real action is. They're limited by the size of the opportunity in software. Then we'll attract more and more capital and more resources and more careers to work on deep tech.
You talk about public good there, Pablos. Among your portfolio investments, which do you believe have the biggest potential to solve civilization scale challenge if deployed at global scale?
Well, we take on a lot of them, but the answer to that is kind of written in stone, which is energy. And the reason is it's so fundamental. When you look around the world, we don't make enough energy to provide for all the people that we're trying to take care of. And so a lot of the problems you want to solve, even things like decarbonization or clean water. Sanitation, if you really look at those problems, they always map back to energy.
Correct.
We can totally solve those problems if we make enough clean, cheap energy to do it. In a lot of places, we're putting the cart before the horse. And so we're not actually solving the problems. We're wasting a lot of attention and money. And so I tend to focus back on how do we solve energy at scale? How do we make enough to provide for everyone on Earth? The same, you and I don't have this problem. We get plenty of energy.
Yeah.
Americans get plenty of energy, and Europeans almost get enough energy. But 3 billion people don't get enough. And so if we could solve that and we could really provide for people, they could have healthier, longer lives. They could be much more productive. You're not productive when you're sick with malaria. You're hanging on for your life. Even if you do survive, you're losing a lot of your life to just dealing with this disease. So we need to solve that. And we need to solve all those kinds of things. And solving energy would be the biggest force multiplier. And so we have a bunch of technologies we work on for that.
And tell me, you believe you can solve clean water if you solve energy?
Yep, for free. You solve clean water for free if you have energy.
The other topic, Pablos, climate tech, of course, is a hot topic today, but food insecurity affects up to 800 million people globally.
Yeah.
Why do you think so few entrepreneurs or investors focus on food and agriculture?
Food is a really difficult place to innovate. Now, on one side, agriculture has been really good at adopting new technologies and scaling them. And if you look at lots of agriculture around the world, and this last year, people don't know this, but we've had the most successful year ever for agricultural production. We made more food in the last year than any other year in the history of humanity.
Really?
Yeah, we make plenty of food. There's a lot of, as people know, I'm sure listening, there's a lot of political games being played that keep that food from being distributed evenly. And so in a lot of cases, we're not getting the food to the people who need it. And that's a failure, not of technology, but a failure of our societal and governmental systems. But lots of technologies could help improve how we feed people. And one of the things we really had to do, you could say over the last century or so, is just scale up. Well, scale up we have succeeded at. Now we kind of want to revisit this and figure out, are some of the corners we cut on scaling up things that we could fix now. And maybe new technologies could help make sure that we grow that food without destroying the land. We grow that food in a way that's optimized for health. If you look at I don't know about here, but where I live in the U.S., I haven't had a good tomato for most of my life. All the tomatoes I get are optimized to feel like styrofoam.
Right.
They're supposed to survive bouncing around in a truck, being carted around to the grocery store and home without falling apart. A good tomato would probably fall apart on the vine when you pick it. Correct. Because it's so ripe and juicy and flavorful. I want one of those, but I can't get it. Well, maybe now we're in a time when we could start to revisit how do we make the most nutritious tomato, the most flavorful tomato, and not the one that's designed for just transport. And so there are lots of ideas, lots of technologies. They are hard to invest in because the margins in food are so low. So if you're, if the cost, that tomato, you might spend $2 on it at a store, $3 on it at a store, but the store is only making 10 cents.
Yeah.
And the guy transporting it's making 10 cents. And the guy, the distributor is making 10 cents, and the farm is maybe getting $1, but it costs them 90 cents to grow it and to harvest it and all this. I'm making up those numbers, but something like that is true. And so if there's only 10 cents to make, it's just a really hard business to innovate in. Now, that's not to say it's impossible. And the thing that people need to realize is there are 10 cents might be enough at a massive scale. If you're making, billions and billions of tomatoes a year, billions, 10 cents times a billion is a lot, right? Or especially if it's 100 billion tomatoes or 1 trillion tomatoes. I actually have no idea how many tomatoes we make, but in a year, it's probably, what's my guess is, billions. I'm guessing it's trillions. Probably trillions of tomatoes a year.
Yeah.
Because, globally. Anyway, we could look these numbers up, but you get the idea. So if you can come up with a way of tying the scale back to the technology, then you can justify getting it off the ground. So, one of the examples for us would be we have a team putting solar farms in space, which sounds kind of crazy, but the technology is all totally practical now. And you have to put the solar panels on a rocket ship and launch them into space and assemble them into big arrays. And
then there's no night anymore, right? There's daytime also.
Yeah, in space, there's no nighttime.
Correct.
And people don't realize that. It's actually a solar panel in space will get sun 24 hours a day. And then what they do is they beam the energy down to Earth using radio waves that can go right through clouds at night. So,
and how far is this, you think?
We aim to build the first commercial array in less than 4 years.
Really?
Yeah. So I know it sounds like science fiction. That's okay. But you can see how, developing that, launching it into space, all that is going to be expensive the first time. But the solar panel in space gets 8 times as much energy, and it works 24 hours a day. And so this will actually be cheaper than coal.
Wow.
And so it's clean, cheap energy. You don't need batteries. You don't need transmission lines. You can beam it to different cities around the world.
Yeah.
And so there's this exciting potential coming. So you couldn't do something like that if you had to make money off of the first, when you first launch it.
Correct.
But the thing will run for decades or whatever, and it will pay for itself over time. So one of the cool things that has happened in the last couple decades is we've just gone crazy with financial machinations. So all the fintech stuff, all of the things that have happened in the financial markets have helped us to have this super advanced toolkit where we could, and you probably know more about this than me, where we can start to figure out how do you piece together financing and investing in something that doesn't fit the mold of a easy win.
But talking of which, I want to ask you, Pablos, for all these cool, crazy inventions that you're working on constantly, what kind of investors do you get? They're not governments, right? They're individuals mostly.
Well, there's a life cycle to these things. So if you look at the stage I invest in, I'm the first investor.
Okay.
So I'll go put money into something that's coming out of a lab and into a startup.
Yeah.
That's really where I kick in. I don't fund research projects. That's not something venture capital can do.
Yeah.
So we have philanthropic and government support for that in a lot of places. But once something can get on a commercial track, then I can invest. Now, I invest in a lot of things that do sound crazy. They're all technically real, but they sound crazy sometimes. I get that. And we do so many of them. I'll do hundreds of them. Okay. And again, that goes back to the shots on goal thing. But the point of that is a kind of financial machination, like I described, as a way of being able to invest in things that are higher risk. But here's the very interesting thing that people miss. There's different kinds of risk that you're managing when you're investing.
Yeah.
And Silicon Valley is famous for taking on what we would call market risk. So they have two kinds of risk, technical risk and market risk. Technical risk is, can this thing be built? Can it be cost effective? That kind of stuff. Market risk is, will somebody pay for the thing you made?
Yep.
So if you think of an iPhone app, there's no technical risk. Any iPhone app you can draw on a napkin can probably be vibe coded this weekend. So that's not technical risk compared to like solar farms in space, let's say. They have unlimited market risk because even if you make that iPhone app and somebody pays you to use it, you don't know if there's going to be a better one next week that wins. You might have made a MySpace and then Facebook comes along, and who knows if Instagram or TikTok is coming.
Correct.
You don't know. That's
Correct.
Infinite market risk. Well, think about what I'm doing. I'm investing in technical risk. Can we build these solar farms? Can we get them on a rocket? Can we get them into space? Can we beam the energy down? That's technical risk. But the day that's all proven, and the day that it works, then I just have the biggest market in the world. There's no market risk. If you can make electricity, you can sell it. If you can provide it, you can sell it. There's no market risk for electricity. And so I think the investors, once they recognize that it's a slightly different game, they're going to see that those big opportunities are there. In a software product, you would have milestones like MVP and product market fit. And these are really questions around market risk. I don't have a product market fit problem for electricity. And so that's really how to think about those kinds of things.
Interesting. Very interesting. This is a good time for a commercial break. But before we break, I want to remind my listeners to visit my website, moneymajlis.com, to redeem your free $50 gift card for a charity of your choice. Your small gesture will help someone somewhere in this wide world. Remember, 50 listeners in every episode get the opportunity to contribute to charity thanks to my generous sponsors. My guest today, Pablos Holman, is contributing his $2,000 Money Majlis gift card to the Orangutan Conservancy.
Amazing.
Thank you, Pablos, for joining my giving movement. As you know, all profits from this podcast go to charities, and yours will go to some lovely orangutans somewhere in Asia.
It seems so cool. Have you been to one of the conservancies?
Yes, I have.
Oh, man,
Yes,
I'm so jealous. I want to do that.
Amazing. I've been to Malaysia and Indonesia both. Thank you very much, and I'll see you after this short break.
The financial world is changing fast. Institutions need to meet the growing client demand for crypto financial services, but they need a battle-tested platform to build upon.
AquaNow is a leading crypto financial services platform, powering incumbent institutions to launch crypto brokerage, payments, and remittance services for their clients, securely and at scale.
Be part of the transformation. Visit aquanow.com today.
The end touches your life
in more ways than you can imagine.
You want more tech,
more speed,
more convenience,
more entertainment,
more business solutions.
EAN gives you all that
and so much more.
EAN. Go for more.
Parents teach their children to talk, to walk, to ride, to read. So why not teach them about managing their money? Introducing the all-new Live Light app, designed to teach 8 to 18-year-olds good money habits. A free and totally secure app designed for them that's always under your control. Top up their cards, set limits, assign tasks, and reward them with allowances. Download the LiveX app to open a Live Light account in minutes, and the first 50 dirham allowance is on us. Visit live.me today. Live Digital Bank by Emirates NBD. Trust and innovation combined. T's and C's apply.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Intellect Design Arena. Intellect drives digital adoption in banking and insurance. Leverage emac.ai, the most comprehensive, composable, and intelligent open finance platform for banking and insurance transformation. Intellect Design Arena.
The end touches your life
in more ways than you can imagine.
You want more tech,
more speed,
more convenience,
more entertainment,
more business solutions.
EAN gives you all that
and so much more.
EAN. Go for more.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the Middle East, and Africa's digital payments champion. We make business happen and economies prosper by simplifying commerce and payments. Trusted by over 250 banks, fintechs and telcos, and 130,000 merchants in over 50 countries. Bringing you tomorrow's payment solutions today.
Welcome back. In today's episode of Money Majlis, we are talking to Pablos Holman, who is a hacker turned inventor, a venture capitalist backing moonshot ideas, and the author of Deep Future, a book that challenges us to rethink what technology is really for. If you haven't got a copy, I would recommend go to Amazon and buy one today, Deep Future. Pablos, while we all celebrate disruption, history shows that technological revolutions often deepen inequalities before benefits are widely shared. Do you believe deep tech, the kind of stuff you are doing, is at the risk of repeating this pattern, especially with automation and AI accelerating labor changes?
Well, look, the first thing I think is very important to acknowledge is there are times when people's lives are, they're damaged, their careers are disrupted, they're, you might have spent a lot of your life developing a skill that gets obsoleted. And so you want to have a lot of compassion for people who are in that position. That said, I think that the progress is very important as a way of taking care of more and more people. And I think the notion of equality is kind of it's sort of a distracting way of thinking about this, because a better way to think about it is we're going to use rich people to fund developing these technologies. We're going to have them waste a lot of money on cool new phones and cars and all these things so that we can figure out which of those things are good, and we can raise economies of scale and get the price down.
Yep.
So that we can then take those things to everyone in the world. And you can see that very clearly with something like smartphones.
Correct.
Now, yeah, they're very expensive and iPhones are expensive, but we're basically using rich people to subsidize bringing that technology to life, growing the scale so that the costs come down, and now you can see we're vanishingly close to the point where anyone on Earth who wants one can have a smartphone.
Correct.
Not just the smartphone, but also the network to get it to the internet. And when you get that, you don't just get a phone, you get Wikipedia, you get YouTube, you get OpenAI, you get all these things once you get the phone. So there's not that story requires that inequality in a way. And in and of itself, I don't know that that's a bad thing. A bad thing to me is poverty. Yeah. To me, the much bigger problem to solve than inequality is poverty. There's a point where, you get rich enough that you don't have to worry about a lot of things that most people worry about. You don't have to worry about where you're going to live or how you're going to get your kids into college or how you're going to put food on the table and those things. But, if you're at that point and then you get twice as rich or 10 times as rich or 100 times as rich, it doesn't really matter. Most of that extra money is just going to be invested in other stuff. So I'm trying to make sure those people invested in solving bigger problems.
Correct.
But if you're on the other end of that and you're having trouble putting food on the table, being, twice as rich matters a lot. Yeah. Being 10 times as rich could be the difference between life and death for your children.
Correct.
And so to me, the big job to take on here is how do you do that for everyone on Earth? We made 8 billion people. We did not make enough energy for them. We did not provide enough food for them. We certainly didn't provide the sanitation and clean water and things that they need. We got to solve that. And we should solve it. We should want to solve it because those are our neighbors.
Correct.
Even if you are, even if you're heartless, you don't want to live in a world surrounded by people who are suffering. That's not a good life for you. So even if you're just completely selfish, you should want to help. And so I think that's how I would think about these things. And I think that's why I see it as very important to develop these technologies that can help us scale taking care of people.
Very well put, Pablos. Very well put. There's this whole hype around AGI, Pablos, artificial general intelligence. Now, in your mind, what has the world most underestimated about the limitations and opportunities of AI and automation? You work so closely with many of these inventors.
Well, look, I think the story I told before about the computer essentially continues. We've been trying to make our computers better and better, faster and faster, more memory, because every time we do that, it unlocks being able to use the computers to help in places they couldn't go before. And we've had for decades this problem with our computers, which is they were so feeble that we had to train generations of nerds to talk to the computer. That's what programmers do. We had to learn, how do I take my idea and translate it into a language the computer can understand? And that's a skill. That's a whole career. You got to focus on being good at that. And often you need teams of those people to accomplish something because it's so much work. Well, what's changed is the computers got good enough that now they can kind of understand us. So you could talk to a computer in English using these LLMs and tell it what you want, and it can mostly figure out what you mean. That's actually a really exciting advancement because it's democratizing. It makes it possible for almost anyone to get a computer to do what they want. I've been able to do that for a long time, and that made me special. I had that superpower. But now my kid has it too, and she doesn't care at all about computers. But she can talk to her computer and she can get it to do the same things I can. And so that is a very important advancement. And even if we never got anything better than that, it's definitely remarkable. And that's why we're putting a lot of attention into bringing that kind of AI to people. Now, at the same time, underpinning that advancement of what we call AI, a lot of what made it possible, I would say the vast majority of what made it possible, is our computers got powerful enough. The computers just got faster and faster. It's less about the breakthroughs in AI algorithms and super smart nerds in Silicon Valley. It's more about the fact that we just got our computers to be so fast that they could do so much computation that they could start to understand our language. And what's cool about that is that vast amount of computation is useful at solving a bunch of other things that computers couldn't do before. And chief among them is the automation. if a computer can understand your language, that's one thing, but can it understand the environment that it's in? Can it look around the way you and I take for granted and understand we're sitting here, these are microphones, those are cameras, there's a door that should be closed because we don't want to let a bunch of noise in because we're recording for broadcast. Like, we understand this whole context.
Correct.
Computer needs to understand that context. And now that we have these super powerful computers, we're being able, and they have machine vision. You've seen how that's advanced. A computer can now, some of the new AIs are actually very interesting because you can turn on your camera and show that to the room and say, and it will start to build a context. You can show it and it'll say, oh, there's cameras. Oh, there's 3. Maybe they're recording a podcast. Maybe this is a studio. It'll start to figure that out in real time. So that's really cool because that's a fundamental basis for things like the robotics. If we were going to have a robot in this room right now, we'd have to build a cage around it in case it moved at the wrong time and accidentally chopped our heads off. Because industrial robots, up to now, they didn't have perception. They could go move in a specific programmed pattern, but if your head got in the way, they're just going to keep going. So we put them in cages. If you look in the factories for a lot of automotive factories and stuff, the robots are in cages to keep humans away from them. Now those robots have vision. Now they can look around. They can see, oh, a human is coming. I'm going to slow down. Oh, a human is coming. I'll just wait till they pass me. Oh, a human is coming. Maybe I'll make them some coffee. Robots don't need the coffee, but the humans do. So, so those kinds of things are happening, and it's a very exciting frontier because I think of AI as being very important and useful for all these applications beyond chatting. Yes, it's great that you can chat with your computer, but the real wins are going to come from using AI to help us understand our world and help us make better decisions about our world, and to be able to put things like robots and automation into our world to take care of the things that humans aren't doing a good job of. And by that I mean, we got bored with working in factories. We got bored with mining. We got bored with working on farms, and that's why farms have automated so much, but they're going to get better. Now, the farms where they're going, a robot looks at a strawberry or tomato, figures out if it's perfectly ripe, if that particular one should be picked now or if we wait till tomorrow. And then if it's wait till tomorrow, it keeps track of that and it reminds itself to come back tomorrow and get that one strawberry. That's incredible. We couldn't do that before. Now it's basically inevitable that we're going to do those things. And so anyway, I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities. All of that is to say, all that we get now with the technologies we have. AGI historically has been this notion that the computer will one day be able to outperform a human at any given task. There's another milestone called ASI, artificial superintelligence, which basically means an AI that can outperform all the best humans at everything. And we may get there. I'm dubious because I think that the current technologies we have aren't going to get us there. We do need some breakthroughs. We need new insights, new inventions, new technologies. I think we will eventually get there, but I think it's being overhyped because a lot of people think we're going to get there with what we have if we just build bigger data centers. And I don't think that's true. So we'll get something really useful, but there's still an elusive milestone ahead that's going to require some invention.
Amazing. Pablos, you work with everyone from rocket scientists to hackers. What's your strategy for spotting talent like that, for funding them, for motivating unconventional inventors? Those who will be dismissed by other, normal R&D labs.
Well, R&D, so there's different kinds of people working in different contexts. I think of like a research lab, a scientific research lab is often focused on what we call basic research. That means trying to understand how the world works. That's very important stuff. It's often very disconnected from commercialization, and you kind of want it to be. once you're trying to build something in the world, and you could call that the development part of R&D, then you typically want your engineers. You want people who know how to build stuff, and you want to. It's great if they have some experience building things because that can often make it faster and better. Yeah. So I've worked with all different kinds of people because I've worked on so many different kinds of projects and people who are experts in different things. And a big part of, I think, what made that possible is that I do have a depth of knowledge in computers. And I learned a lot about computers, and I sort of kept up with that. So that's my kind of center of gravity. But even if I'm working on rockets or, energy systems or something, that's not about computers so much, but I can appreciate the depth of knowledge that another expert has. And that really helps me a lot to communicate with them. I can understand when I'm out of my depth of knowledge because I know what it's like to go deep, and I know how to and I can communicate with them to get their help. And so that's a very important thing to strive for. I think I didn't strive for that. It just serendipitously happened to me as part of my weird career. But I think people could do that more deliberately. We call it T-shaped individuals. So depth of knowledge might be like I-shaped person.
Yeah.
That's me with computers. This part is generalist. Can you communicate with people who are good at things you suck at? That's how I think about it. Can you work with people who are good at things that you're not good at? That's this generalist thing. T-shaped is the people who can kind of do both, and they're the most valuable. They're the ones who I think are most useful. These folks, people who are just a generalist, are a problem because they're the kind of people who, they say they can do anything, but you can't really count on them to do anything well. So lots of millennials in there. Yep. That's a hard one. These people are a problem because they're so focused. Ones, this a lot of times is scientists. They're the world's leading expert in a very narrowly defined thing, but they don't have the vision. They don't have the bigger picture of how these things connect together. And so I think you do need both of those people as well, but the most valuable ones are those T-shaped people, and I'm looking for them a lot of the time. Or I'm trying to fill in the gaps. I'm trying to figure out, what is this person good for? You could be a specialist, and I can still appreciate you and put you to good use.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be able to do, is use the specialists, but it can be limiting, so...
And talking to T-shaped people, Pablos, you worked with both Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, visionaries known for thinking decades ahead. What have you personally learned from their approaches to invention, scale, and tackling impossible long-term goals?
Well, that is the thing I learned from them, is that both of them in their way have the ability to think on much longer time horizons, that they're not exactly bound by that. They both very well understand and appreciate that 10-year cycle I described before, but they are not constrained by it in the same way. And that really helped me. So learning from working with those guys what it's like to look at a much longer time horizon, figure out what's going to work in the long run, figure out if we can maybe, head in that direction instead of just, if you try to make a plan and you're just focused on this week or this month or this year or this quarter or this, you're going to make a very short-term plan. You're not going to be very strategic, and you're going to waste a lot of time and money on things that aren't going to help you get to where you want to go. So a good example of that for me, the one that I think of the most, is at Blue Origin. People really don't understand why billionaires have rocket companies. And it's not because Jeff is trying to make money. He has a way of making money that's working pretty well. It's because he has this long-term vision for humanity. How do you ensure that humans continue to thrive? And we've caused a little damage on this planet. It's not totally clear we've figured out how to keep from doing that going forward. so there are those problems. There's existential threats, like the planet could get hit by an asteroid that wipes out humans, the way we saw happen with dinosaurs. So that's a risk. In the best case scenario, Earth eventually melts into the sun. So if you think humans are worth something special and worth preserving, in the very long run, we need some kind of backup plan. Mm-hmm. And so Jeff really believes that we should be preparing to explore space and make it possible for humans to thrive in space. And the long-term visions of this sound wild, but it's stuff out of science fiction. You know, you could imagine humans living in space colonies that we build and then turn Earth into a wildlife refuge. Mm-hmm. You know, make this place the most amazing and luscious. I mean, we have the best planet by far. So if you could just let the planet be good at what it's good at. And that sounds a little crazy. Who knows if they want to live in a space colony? But the truth is, where do you live now? You know, you live in a city. Yep. There's nothing. The only plants around are ones that we brought in. Most of them are plastic anyway. Yeah. So if we can build a city, imagine Dubai. We take Dubai, we wrap it into a big loop like this. We spin it so you get some gravity, and you won't know the difference. the Dubai in space. Correct. And you can still have all your apartments and cafes and streets and skyscrapers and malls and things that people want, pickleball, whatever you need. So we could still do that. And then humans wouldn't have the same impact on the environment on Earth. And, you know, if you want to go skiing, you take a shuttle down to Earth and go skiing. Well, it's just because the last thing I would say on this, you know, from that, it helped me to learn to think about my projects and things I work on a longer time horizon. You know, can we become better ancestors? You know, can we leave the world better for generations yet to come? And so I often start by thinking about my projects in that context.
Now, Pablos, do you believe that real innovation in the future is more likely to be developed by open collaboration across borders, or by nation states and sovereign funds racing for exclusive advantage?
Well, that's interesting. The way I think about it, there's sort of a developmental cycle to these things, like raising a kid. Mm-hmm. You know, a new technology has to go through different stages. And there's the really fun part at the beginning, and then the kid is born, and then the kid has to be, you know, sort of very delicately taken care of for a few years, and then they can learn to walk and stumble around, and you get them in preschool, and then school, and then college, and then you can finally get your life back. So that's the process for a kid, and people are familiar with it. A technology has to go through that too. And so some of the things we do, like the patent system, protect an invention, or supposed to anyway, in the early stages. You know, the invention is fragile. Yeah. It needs to be able to attract investors. And so we give an inventor a temporary monopoly on that invention. Yeah. For in the US, it's 20 years at the most. Mm-hmm. And that is a way to partly incentivize invention, but also partly to attract more capital and resources. Because, I got a 20-year monopoly on this invention. Now I can go to investors and say, hey, we're the only ones on Earth that have this technology. Put money in. We'll make a lot of money. We'll return your investment. You can go invest in a bunch of other stuff after that. But in 20 years, it becomes public domain. And that's a you know, God did not create that game. Mm-hmm. Humans created the game. There are problems with that game, but it's the best thing we have right now to solve this problem of how do you attract investment to a new technology early on. So there's things like that. But the ultimate goal of all of these things, and they do trend towards it, is for everyone in the world to have access to that. And if you look at technologies on long enough time horizon, that is what happens. Mm-hmm. You know, we all have access to wheels now. That might have been patented for the first 20 years. Correct. But, you know, everybody has wheels. Everybody has fire. You know, those are the early ones. Now almost everybody has access to be able to drive a car or at least a bicycle, if not, or maybe a moped or something. But, you know, cars have been scaled up. That used to be very exotic. only a century ago, it was very exotic to have a car. Same with airplanes, like the amount of people in the world who can fly around and go places on airplanes. The growth curve on that is crazy.
Yep.
Not anybody, but lots of people can fly on a plane.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. When I was a kid, we felt special because we got to fly on a plane one time a year. Mm-hmm. Now I feel special if I don't have to get on a plane once a week. So, those things have happened. And so the computers are rapidly, democratized technologies. They go everywhere. And so that's happening faster and faster. And these technologies do ultimately find their way. It's just you have to be a little more patient than I think most people want to see.
Absolutely. My last serious question, Pablos.
Yeah.
As tech becomes more potent, from gene editing to autonomous weapons and whatnot, are there lines that technologists should not cross, even in the service of public good? What ethical framework do you think or do you recommend for deep future inventions?
Well, what I think is humans need to focus on developing new technologies, inventing them, bringing them to life, understanding them, experimenting with them, and finding the problems. Mm-hmm. You want to find what is the problem that is being caused, and can we fix it? Mm-hmm. Can we stop doing that? Can we invent a better technology? Can we decide that we don't want to use that in the same way, replace it with something better? Those are again, it goes back to that developmental cycle, the life cycle of a technology. We're kind of in junior high with social media, still very immature. We're not even in preschool with AI.
Yeah.
For things I mentioned before, like fire and wheels and hammers, we're in grad school or beyond. We have a functional relationship with those technologies. And so people, again, are impatient, and a lot of times they want to project out and imagine all these scary problems, and Hollywood is really good at showing you all the ways things can go terribly wrong, and we're going to end up with robots that enslave us and turn us into paper clips and all this kind of stuff.
Correct.
But the truth is, in the long run, the technologies always win. If you take the time to invent a new technology and you develop it, bring it to life, make it cost effective, show that it's good, governments and societies can suppress it for a couple of generations, but ultimately the technology wins. And as a great example of that, I think the best example right now is in our lifetime, humans sort of conflated nuclear reactors with nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
We outlawed the wrong one. Mm-hmm. And if you had done it the other way around, we never would have heard of global warming. Nuclear reactors are the cheapest, cleanest, safest, most scalable energy source we've ever found, and we outlawed them. And so we did the wrong thing. We got on the wrong fork in human history. We're still not being honest with ourselves about that. And so that's something we need to fix. But, we're about 50, 60 years into that. My daughter thinks Chernobyl is a TV show for old people. So kids, that next generation will grow up with a different story, and they'll internalize those technologies, and they'll figure out how to use them in a better and more productive fashion. That is what happens in the long run. It's very hard to see when you're in it, looking up. And right now we risk telling ourselves a lot of dystopian stories about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And some places want to regulate it into oblivion. But these are just tools for us. The first hammers were probably used to smash heads for like a million years. And then people figured, this is handy for building a home, and now we build more homes and we smash a lot less heads. So there's a kind of developmental process you have to go through. And so I think it is immoral to try to regulate things you don't understand. And this is not a popular view, but if you use the nuclear reactor example, that is what happened. We instead of researching these things, studying them, building them, testing them, trying to make them better, we just outlawed them. And we should have done it the other way around. And I think that's how you should view things like artificial intelligence as well. We need to recognize that the only way out is through. We got to go forward. So So you want to regulate against the harms, not against the technologies.
Couldn't agree more with you, Pablos.
Thank you.
Before we close, I will move to my fun rapid fire round.
Let's do it.
But I'll pose you 8 short answer questions. We're not allowed to overthink, Pablos. Just tell us what comes first to your mind.
I'm terrible at short answers.
Your time starts now. Well, you have a meeting next, so I guess answers have to be
I
fun.
got to go. So yeah.
Yes. If a magic wand could solve only one pressing global challenge, which problem would you choose and why?
Energy.
That's the biggest need for
sure.
for humanity. What's a belief about technology or the future you hold very close to your heart that almost everybody disagrees with?
I am a computational maximalist, so I believe that more compute is better always.
Okay. You patented over 70 inventions. What's the most unexpected patent you filed?
I recently discovered that I have a patent that we invented with Bill Gates for for video generation from text. Which at the time, this is from like 10 or 15 years ago, and I remember the internet wrote blog posts about how ridiculous this idea was, that you would write text and turn it into videos automatically with a computer. We actually have a patent on that, but now you see things like Sora and Runway are doing that.
Correct.
And so we were mocked for it, but it's come true. And I don't know where that patent is today. It's probably not expired, so we should probably find it and see if we can sell a license to Google or someone.
You should, absolutely. If you weren't inventing the future, Pablos, what completely different job, unrelated to what you do today, would you love to try?
I would like to be a machinist.
Machinist?
I think it's so I'm kind of a crappy machinist. I've done some of it, but I'm not really in it. But I just love making things, and using machines to make machines is really exciting to me. My grandfather was a machinist. I think I would like to do that but it's probably not the best use of my time. Other people are better at it than me.
Okay, how interesting. You worked on spaceships. If you could take a joyride to Mars today with anyone, dead or alive, who would that be?
A joyride to Mars. Probably I'd choose John von Neumann. He was the godfather of the computer.
Yep.
A sort of notorious polymath, a very interesting guy who was able to figure out a lot of the puzzle pieces that we needed to make computers work, and we still use them even now. So I don't know, but I probably would. That'd probably be my first choice.
Interesting. What's one invention you regret not pursuing?
Oh man,
there are so many.
I have so many I want to make. Some of them have come to life, without my help, and so that is kind of rewarding in its own way. And I'm really thankful for that. I like it when people take these things on, so I don't have to do them. What do I wish? There's one that's kind of on the verge. I was the first person to try to adapt 3D printers to print food for meals, to make meals. And that sounded so crazy when we first started doing it. Now, it sounds a little less crazy every year. And I think people are starting to really head in that direction. It's really about using robots to make meals. And I think it's important because you could make meals that are customized for you and that are healthier. And so we'll get there.
Sure. If you could redesign one part of human civilization, what would that be?
I think the decision-making process for civilization needs some work. I think that I would redesign it using computational models to help you see what the results of your decisions will be before you make them. And that way we could choose the future we want to build. We could make better choices about how to get there. And I think that's coming. That is, when we talk about AI, that's what I think about, not about chatting. I think about models of our societies showing us how to get to a better place. And I'm looking forward to a world where governments are using these tools to make better decisions.
Pablos, any last comments before we close?
Yeah, look, I hope it's come across, but what I really think is that we live in this world we think is full of technology, It's really just full of software. We're missing out on huge opportunity to change that, to use technologies that can help us solve bigger problems, more important problems. And I think that the future can be so much better and so much more peaceful. If you think about what are all these wars about, well, they're wars over control of resources, access to energy. If we made enough energy for everyone on Earth, what are we going to fight over? It's a really beautiful and possible thing to achieve in our lifetime. We can do that. And it's sad to look around and see so many people that are caught up in being distressed about all these political machinations and things. I think people would be better off just put your head down and build something. We have a lot of things to build.
Thank you, Pablos. And I look forward to welcoming you back to Dubai very soon.
Thank you so much. This is delightful.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Pablos Holman, for electrifying us with all your bold perspectives and your tireless pursuit of problems that matter. From lasers shooting mosquitoes to concrete that could outlive civilizations, today's discussion reminds us that breakthrough innovation is less about gadgetry and more about moving humanity forward. To everyone tuning in, be the inventor in your story, whether as a problem spotter or funder or a curious mind refusing to settle. The deep future is not written yet. And as Pablos shows, it's open to anyone crazy enough and courageous enough to reimagine it.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
Money Majlis is brought to you by E&, a global technology group.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Intellect Design Arena, driving digital adoption in banking and insurance.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Live Digital Bank, powered by Emirates NBD. Trust and innovation combined.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is conceived and scripted by me, Suvo Sarkar, is produced by Saveen Achkar and distributed by Hani Mohammed, both from Podster Studio, UAE. My giving partner is Good World. Please keep listening and sharing and writing to me with your feedback on suvo@moneymajlis.com. Visit my website, moneymajlis.com, for all past episodes or the research on these episodes in one place, and to join me in my giving movement. Till next time, goodbye. Stay well and do good.